Hi guys, welcome to part 5 of this series. Today we are going to be looking at a proper way to organize our components and also do a kind of cleanup for our prop drilling method, right? So instead of the approach where we have to pass a root state here, like we have in this case now, we have a global state in our app entry, and we have a function that is doing item update, that's the to-do updates. Then we are passing the function down to-do lists. Then from the to-do list, we pass it down to the to-do item. So what we want to do today, we want to decouple all the components in such a way that they can individually function by themselves, and we have a cleaner approach. So the first thing I want us to do is organize our project folder, right? So here I would create a components folder. I would move my to-do item and to-do list components inside the components folder. Automatically, my VS Code should sort the import file for me, as you can see in here. So the next thing I want to do is I want to, okay. So before we go ahead, right, let me introduce you guys to something called context. So when you're working with React, you have something called context. Like the context API helps you to create a kind of shared state among your components. For instance, now, if we were to use this items state in another component aside the to-do items, now we have to be passing these items from this root component down to that specific component till we get to it. So imagine if we add in our to-do list, there is one other component that is here inside our to-do item. Maybe on that specific to-do button is where we want to use the items of state. We have to pass it down till we get there. So it's not a very efficient way to organize your code, and it's not a very proper way to build. So we are going to be doing a cleanup. Like we're going to be implementing a proper approach to do something of this kind of update, right? So the first thing I want to do in here is I want to create my context, right? So for the context, for React context, you need you need majorly one thing, but in your implementation, you would eventually have two parts of it, right? So I'm going to create a folder in my source directory called store. So this store is going to be a global store where all my application state is going to live, right? So to initiate the store, I need to create two files. The first one is my context.ts file. That's where I'm going to be storing my app context. Then the second one would be my provider .csx. This is going to be a component, right? So we'll get to that in a second, right? So the first thing we want to do in here is I would go to my context, right? So I'm going to define the first thing, I want to define the structure of how I want my app state to look like. And since this is something I would most likely export to somewhere else, that's I'm going to be using it in the provider as well. So I want to export this as a, let me call this states, right? So I would call this states. Then for now, we only have the items state, and the items, that's the to-do items, is going to be to-do item props. It's a list of to-do items, right? This is my state. This is what I want to share among multiple objects. So to make that work, I have to do I have to create a context for that specific purpose. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to also export a context here. So I would call it, let me call this, let me just call this context, to be honest. Yeah, I would call this context since it's going to be serving as a global context for me. So in this case, I would do create context. Then I want to pass in the generics for my context. In this case, it is going to be okay. So what I'm going to do here, right? I'm going to define one extra type in here, right? So this type is going to serve as the contents of my context. That's weird, but so for this specific case, right, I want to have two things in my context props. So I want to have my app states, which is going to be this state component we defined, state type we defined previously. And it would be the second one now would be our set state function, which would be of it will be a function type, but it will be from the React function type, I think, which is something around dispatch dot let me see. Okay, I'll peep at that in a sec. For now, the typing is a little bit weird and long, so I would peep at that for now. I don't want to memorize that. So we would come back to this set state typing. We don't want to use this any type, so we would come back to this in a bit. So the next thing I want to do here is for my context, I want to pass in context props or undefined. So we are going to initialize the context with undefined, right? Because we don't want to initialize our state and set state. We don't want to initialize our context parameters inside here. We want to initialize it somewhere else. So here I would pass undefined, right? And this should still be able to work like this. Then the next thing I want to do is go to my provider.tsx file, right? So I want to create a provider. So a provider would be, it's more like a global source where other components can pull data from. So like the name implies, it provides some values, it provides data to other sources or to other recipients. So to create a provider, it's going to be a component that receives a children or a child component, right? And it provides that value to the child component automatically. You don't need to do some prop drilling where you pass it down from one component to the other component so you get to the final component that needs it. You don't need to do that here. So the next thing you want to do is you want to say exports function, then you type in the name of your provider. In this case, I just want to name my provider. Then it's going to be taking in some props. And given the kind of person I am, I want to add a typing for that specific prop. So I would say provider props. Then I would say children, then React node like this. I think this could actually be a single line. So yeah, React node like this. Then I want to say provider props here and define my function body. So in this case, we want to bring our context in here because the context is what actually holds the context provider. So from here, we want to return the context provider, the actual context provider from here, right? Because this context actually comes with a provider. So that's what we are going to be using here. So we are going to say context, right, dot provider like this. Then we are going to pass in our children. Awesome. So the next thing we want to do, you can see this is telling us value is required. Like it's missing a specific value. The provider component always requires a value, at least the one from the context. So we don't want to be initializing our provider every time, is why we have it here. I mean, it's very logical to do this. So what we want to do is we want to have a global state. So in here, I will define a use state hook. So the first value is going to be state. Of course, then the second one is going to be set state, right? So what we want to do here, I would define my use states components, then it would be of my state type. As the state from the context is the one that would be in here. So this would be serving as my initial app state, right? So I can come here and say initial state just to keep things clean. I can define my initial state here and just do initial state in here as well. So for now, I would just, since my initial state is just containing the items, so I would just define items in here with an empty array, right? Then let me fix this. Okay, then the next thing I want to do is I want to pass this value to my context provider. Then I would pass value, or it takes in two parameters for it takes in two fields rather, or two keys from what we can see here. The first one is state, then the second one is set state. So to fix this typing thing we have in here, you can see I think I almost got it the other time, but I didn't fully get it. So yeah, this is the type I actually want to copy, this one here. So React Dispatch. I mean, you could copy it too if you want. I'm not in the mood to to remember something like that. So yeah, I'm going to come back to my context, add the typing in here. Awesome. So the next thing I want to do is actually, I think we're done with this section of the store provider, right? We're done with this section. So the next thing I want to do is go to my to-do list, right? So I wouldn't be needing these props anymore, right? So I would take this out. I would take out this typing as well. Then the next thing I want to do in here is I want to pull my context from here, right? So I would say constant context equals use, right? So if you're using React 19, you can use the use hook, right? So this hook here you can use, but if you're not using React 19, maybe a lower version of React, you can still say something like use context like this and it would still work. But for me, I want to use hook because I'm using React 19 as well. So I will be able to use this. So now I need to pass in my context from here, right? So what I want to do in here, you could see we've initialized our context here, and you can also see that the context is saying undefined or context props, which is expected, right? So the thing with context is if you don't initialize your components within the provider, it is not going to work. So I would show you that in a bit. From what you can see here, we have our context, right? So we can as well say context dot items, or sorry, dot state like this, and we would say dot items. Everybody should be fine, right? So I can take out these two functions since they are optional. So if I come to my app tsx, I am going to copy this default state we have here. I'm going to copy this and go to my provider here. Go to my provider and specify the initial state for my items, right? So if I have my app.tsx here, it doesn't take in the items parameter or any other parameter anymore, so I can take this out. I mean, you would be expecting ideally this should work, right? But okay, I'm not running my server. Sorry, I almost forgot. I was starting to feel weird, like it's still showing up here. So yeah, so if I refresh this, you can see like nothing comes up here, right? Nothing is coming up. So to fix that, you can add an error in where is it here? In the to-do list, right? Because what is happening here is the context is not being provided, right? So do I have a browser? I don't open it. I don't have a terminal here. So I would have shown you this browser terminal thing, but I don't think I have one in this specific browser here. But all in all, if you open your browser console, you should see an error in this specific file, right? So to yeah, so to properly do a check for if you haven't, let me even show you guys to be sure. So you can say in this case, you can put an if statement, say if uh you don't have the context value, that's if not context, then just in our case, let's do an alert, then say context needs to be within a provider like this. Imagine, I don't know how to spell provider. Yeah. So we would say context needs to be within a provider in this specific case. That's if the context is undefined anyway. So I would refresh this. I'm not sure, maybe the alerts. I don't know what this is anyways. But then you can you know what? Let me open this in a browser for you guys to be sure. Okay, so you guys should be able to see this error coming up in here right now, right? So you can see I have this error that says context needs to be within a provider. That means the context is actually null. Okay, so back in VS Code now. From what we can observe here, right, we can simply do a proper error throwing here. So we can say error of component. Okay, let me say context needs to be within a provider. You can add a proper error if you're working on a like a proper project as well. But for me, I would just basically do something like this. Then I can come here and just extract the state from here, or I don't know how this React people call it, but I could do something like this. I've forgotten what they call this. Yeah. So I can basically do this and I will still have my states.items value, which is the to-do items in here. So what to fix this, I need to go to my app.csx file. Then I would import my provider in here. That would be provider. Then I would close this up, and I believe my, yeah, now this should be working by now. So you can see immediately we imported our provider, the to-do list automatically shows up, right? So now what we want to do in here is this, we are not done yet. So we fixed the to-do list, right? So the next thing we want to do is, I'm closing this up. The next thing we want to do is fix our to-do item component. So from what we can see here, this is still requesting that we have, or it's optionally requesting that we have two function paths, which is the update item and set items. We don't need that for now. So we don't need that for the specific use case to work. So what we want to do in here is we want to do something similar, but first we'll bring in our context from here. Right, we'll bring in our context from here inside our to-do item component. Then I import everything I should import. Then the next thing I want to do in this case is, instead of doing set items here, I want to import set state. Right. So what else do I need to do here? So instead of getting the set items value from the props, I can basically say set state, right? But our state value is an object, not a list. So we need to convert this new state to a list like this and use the key of items like this to update our state. So by the time this is saved, let me see. Okay, sorry. This should be, yeah, we don't need to pass this as a function anymore. So this should be states dot items, right? Yes, we don't need to pass this anymore. So by the time this is saved, let me properly show this to you guys so you can clearly read this as well. So what we did in here is we set a new items value using this same method we did before. I only just changed where it is updating and the specific value that is being updated here, right? The logic is still the same thing, which is this, right? So my delete should still work properly from here. Like you can see, I can delete things, right? Then the next function we want to fix is the update item, and I'm going to copy it from here as well. So I'm going to actually cut this, and I would take out this from our app component, which you can see by now our app like is already looking clean, right? So next I just need to go to my to do item, and instead of doing props.update, I would import my, or I would add my update function in here like this. So instead of doing set items again, I want to change this to set state, right? And the value I want to set is going to be an object, not an array. So I want to do items like this. And the items I'm actually setting is from this state. So I want to still do something like state.items. I'm not sure this is a lot of updates for you guys not to be able to follow up, but it's actually straightforward in a way. All right. So we have a set state and a state we can use across our application anywhere we want. So now you see we have our function to update item and delete item all in where they are supposed to be, where they are needed. So if we check everything we have, it should work properly. From here we can check to do items, we can delete them, we can do more deletes. Everything should still work as it was, right? So I hope you guys learned something from this. If you have questions, suggestions, anything at all, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to other people that might be interested as well. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.